Hi everyone. I can see the participants are clicking up. Everyone's coming into the session. We really appreciate you being here. Thank you so much for joining. My name is Leslie Hendrickson. I am on the steering committee of the Newburyport Literary Festival. I just want to tell you a few things before we get started. We're using the webinar format, so you as a participant will not appear on the screen like you do in a meeting format. If you have questions, please use the Q&A thread at the bottom of the window, and the moderator, Dyke Hendrickson, will look at those in the last 10 to 15 minutes and answer as many questions as possible. The session is going to last about 45 minutes. In the chat box, I am going to put some information about a link to our website, which has more information about our authors and other events on May 3rd. There are also links to our independent bookstore partners, the Bookshop of Beverly Farms and Jabberwocky in Newburyport. They have books from all of our authors, and we encourage you to support them or other local independent bookstores. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Dyke Hendrickson. Thank you so much for coming.
Hello, I'm Dyke Hendrickson. I'm part of the nepotism activity here in Newburyport. Victor Hendrickson, founder and co-director. Leslie's done a load of work. Our son Drew is helpful, and I'm here also. I'm thrilled to be here. This is a panel regarding questions for authors who write mysteries. I write mostly nonfiction. In fact, I had a book come out recently on the Coast Guard, but of course the bookstores ended their play the next day. But I have written a mystery, and it wasn't much of a mystery, I've got to say. It didn't go very far, but it enables me to have that one credential so I can do the mystery panel, which I really enjoy. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to show the book and introduce the author. You can see their names there. And they're, after they say a little bit, each of them's going to talk about 2 or 3 minutes about their book, why they got into it, what number it is, and what, inspires them to do so. And I have, quite a few questions. I'm a journalist by trade. And I think particularly this is a significant moment in books and book selling and writing books. I don't think we've ever been here before where many of the stores were closed. So this is going to be a great moment. Edwin Hill, you see him up there. This is Edwin's book. It's The Missing Ones. It's a great book set in part off of Maine. And so if you know Maine, if you know the islands, it's quite interesting. Catherine McKenzie is also here. Her book is I'll Never Tell. She's also involved in an area with water and boats and that type of thing. And we also have Peter Swanson, who wrote 8 Perfect Murders. And I have to ask him how deeply he went into his research, or if he's always like murders, because this is deep into mystery writing, but I'll let him talk about that. I enjoyed all 3 of them. So Edwin, in terms of alphabetical order, you're number 1. Can you talk a little about your book and what you saw in the first thought of it, and tell us what readers can get?
Sure. Thanks. Thanks for having us today, Dyke, and thanks to the Newburyport Literary Festival for having us. So this is, I'll hold up the cover again. This is my book. It's called The Missing Ones. It's actually the second in a series. The first book in the series is this one called Little Comfort. And the series is about a research librarian named Hester Thursby who finds missing people on the side. In the first book, she, I don't want to talk too much about the first book, but she went through a very traumatic experience in the first book. And so for the second book, I really wanted to address the trauma of the experiences that she went through in the first book. And so the story is really about, starts when Hester gets a mysterious email from someone in her past asking her to go to an island off the coast of Maine. She goes to the island. I based the island off a very real place called Monhegan Island, which is about 8 miles off the coast of Booth Bay Harbor. I wound up changing a lot of the geography of the island, and also I inhabited it with a lot of really horrible people. So I decided to change the name to a fictional island, which is called Finisterre Island. So I always say the beauty is from Monhegan and the horrible people are from me. So she goes out to the island right before a storm hits, and it's in the fall, and she gets embroiled in some of the local, what's going on with the local politics there while she explores what happens with this around this mysterious email.
Catherine?
Hi, thanks again for having me. My book is I'll Never Tell. The water that it's set around is something called the Eastern Townships outside of Montreal, where I am right now. And following up on what Edwin just said, it's based on a real location, not real events. It's a murder mystery set at a summer camp. A family of 5 children, adult children, parents die suddenly, and they come home over Labor Day weekend to read the will. But something happened to a girl 20 years earlier at camp, and until they solve the mystery of her death, they can't decide what to do with the property, which has become quite valuable. I describe the book as an Agatha Christie novel meets The Nest. And I had a couple of threads that came together for this book. I spent 9 summers at the same summer camp and 11 summers in total. And I always thought it'd be a great setting for something, and I didn't know what. I also wanted to write a family saga, and I also wanted to write a sort of classic Agatha Christie closed room mystery where you know that one of the players there is responsible. And I gave myself, the ideas kind of fused together, and I came up with this with I'll Never Tell, and then I gave myself the added challenge of having 7 narrators in the book. So you follow through the 5 family members, someone else who works on the property, and then you see the night in question from the girl's perspective 20 years ago. So it's really, I hope anyway that I pulled off that sort of, again, closed set, you know, one of them's the murderer, who's it going to be at the end of it? And also really liked playing with those family dynamics, a family of 5 children. And it's always interested me about how people who grew up in the same house and in the same family can have totally different points of view about what happened in their life and in the past.
Yeah, I read it. It was very interesting right to the last couple pages. Peter, talk a little about your book, if you would.
Hi, I'm Peter Swanson. This is 8 Perfect Murders. This is my 6th standalone psychological thriller. I'll talk a little bit about how I came up with the idea, just because that gives away the plot as well. But it was an unusual book in the sense that the idea just kind of fell into my lap whole. That rarely happens with me. But I was out taking a walk. This was probably 3 years ago. I was walking around Walden Pond. Some people might know it, in Concord, Massachusetts. And I was currently working on a short story, and in that short story, someone had to kill somebody else, because that's the type of short story I like to write. And I was trying to come up with a very clever idea for that murder. And so in my mind, I was thinking, well, what are some really clever ideas for murders that I know from fictional history? And instantly I sort of had this thought, what if a book blogger or a bookstore owner wrote a list of the most perfect, clever murder mysteries in fictional history. And then I thought, well, and what if someone else took this list and began copycatting these crimes in real life? And that was the spark. I mean, that was the book right there. By the end of the walk, oddly enough, I pretty much knew who my main character was, a bookstore owner named Malcolm. I knew a lot of the books that were going to be on the list. I knew who the killer was. I knew what their relationship was going to be. I kind of had the whole book. That doesn't mean a lot didn't change along the way, but it was sort of a very
rewarding walk that you took, I've got to say.
Yeah, this never happens to me. And it was both a kind of a thrill, because the whole book was sort of sitting there in my brain, and also, of course, a moment of terror. I mean, being a writer involves many moments of terror, but I was like, well, now I have to go write this. It's not like writing down a few sentences. It's a 300-page book. But that was the genesis of the book, and similar to what Catherine was saying, and similar to Edwin's books that I know as well, is, you know, it has some of the tropes of classic crime literature, and in fact, the most of all my books, the most of a classic whodunit type style of book.
Well,
you didn't answer the question if you actually
Sure.
committed murders in.
I did a lot of research. My research involved, you know, reading lots of books, which is the best type of research to do.
Well, we're using, many of you used siblings or family members. Catherine, is that one thing that you definitely wanted to do? Because I believe you had 5 siblings introduced within the first 2 chapters. And so, and also, Edwin, you had families. Does a family add a significant dynamic in your writing?
Yeah, I wanted to, this is my 9th book, and I'd had people who had siblings in other novels that I wrote, but never one where the family was central to the story. And so I wanted to do that. And I wanted to make it a big family because I think that's a more interesting challenge. So really the family is at the core. And to me, everyone in the family has a piece of the puzzle about what happened to Amanda, who's the girl that was killed 20 years before. And I think I always thought to myself, I was writing it, as if this family just sat down and had a conversation for half an hour, they could figure this out. But they kept getting in their own way. And as somebody who's writing a mystery, particularly if you're trying to write this sort of more classic type of mystery, you know, you have to plant seeds along the way, but you have to keep the thing going and play out the mystery over the course of that time period, and without a detective. So the difference between this and a classic Agatha Christie is I don't have a detective, I don't have Miss Marple, I don't have Hercule Poirot. So the family themselves are investigating themselves, and I think that adds that element of the insider where you think you know people in your family, but you don't necessarily know them.
Well, Edwin, you had, you know, some family dynamics going on. I think you also had a private investigator. And as well as dysfunctional family members. How did you pull those all together? And you did have some cacophony, you did have tension. I assume that that's what you were looking for.
Yeah, so, you know, I read a series. So one of the things that you want to do in a series is pose some questions in one book that you answer in the next book that don't annoy the reader of the current book, which is a balancing act. So in my first book, there was a big gaping question at the end of that. If anyone had read, I don't want to give away what the question is because it actually plays into the second book a lot, but there was a character who was a very central character in the first book, and anyone who read that book would want to know more about that character. So that was the impetus of the second book, was answering that question. So Hester is estranged from her immediate family, but one of the things that she does in the whole series is that she has a found family, an ever-expanding found family. And so part of going to the island was exploring her found family, the extensive found family. And then through that novel, she winds up expanding her found family even more. So, but definitely there is tension between the members of the family. Hester has a partner who's called Morgan. And I always say that Hester and Morgan have a relationship that is based on love, but it is not based on honesty. And so, so they're continuing to sort of grapple with some of the secrets that they keep from each other, and some of those secrets then carry through into the next book, the one that comes out in a couple months.
Well, Peter, you have family relationships in the late wife, in your case, of your protagonist, and you know, how did you decide to do a wife who had died several years earlier, but nevertheless was a very large part of the story?
Yeah, I often think of mysteries, you know, they have a starting point, and then they move forward in time. I mean, usually in a traditional mystery, you're moving forward in time. And as you're moving forward in time, you're not only learning the events that are happening after the starting point, you keep learning about the past. I mean, this is what a traditional mystery does. It unfolds the past as it moves along, and the past is family. I mean, that is what we all grapple with. I mean, there are probably some detective novels that don't deal directly with family. In fact, this book has probably less family than most of my books in terms of parenting, parents or siblings. But even with a book like this, one of the things I always do is go back and really think about the family origins of my characters. Who were their parents? Who were their siblings? What kind of childhood did they have? Because I think this informs what kind of adults we all are. Even if you're not going to put it in the book, I think it's worthwhile exercise to do that for your characters. Just to think, you know, everyone was once a child and then became, you know, made into this world. So so definitely when I started this book, I knew it was this this kind of introverted bookseller who's telling the story, but that his past informs him, and his past is both how he was raised, but also his marriage and what happened in that marriage.
Now, Peter, as you're writing the book, are you concerned about the reader's feelings and thoughts? Like if your protagonist turns out to be a bloody murderer, in some cases, a reader could be disappointed. In your case, your protagonist had, you know, this inglorious end, but not necessarily a bad end. I mean, both of you as well. Do you worry about, you know, how these characters end up, and if the reader had liked them and they were guilty, are you letting them down?
I was when I was writing my second novel, which was The Kind Worth Killing, I realized about halfway through that every character in that book was a murderer, and fairly not redeemable. And I had a moment of panic, because there is a sort of thought out there that when you're writing a crime novel, that you need a hero or protagonist at the center that will set the world to rights. And so I got worried, and you know, a couple things I reminded myself of. One was that Gillian Flynn's had just written Gone Girl had come out, and I thought back on how much I enjoyed that book, and how that's a book that does not have redeemable characters. And then Ruth Rendell is another English mystery writer that I love, and she often writes books with really terrible characters. So to me, it was if you're not going to have likable characters, they better be interesting, because what you're then going to propel the book with is, what are they going to do next? And they better be complex, because, you know, you want to dig into what makes them who they are. So so it does present new challenges, but I also think you don't need to have a likable character to make a readable book.
Well, Catherine, you had one of your likable characters get into the soup towards the end of your novel. Were you concerned that you know, this would be a letdown for some readers, or does that not affect you?
No, I mean, building on what Peter said, is I don't really necessarily think about whether my characters are likable or not, because, you know what, if you read through the reviews of your book, which I know we're not supposed to do, but I admit to doing, people take to, you know, some people will be like, oh, I love this person. Other people will say, oh, I didn't like anybody in the book. So I don't think you can write that way. I think what Peter was saying is correct, is that you have to have a complex character, and nobody is wholly good or wholly bad. I mean, if even Ted Bundy had some redeeming characteristics, he had friends, he had people who cared about him, right? So, and if you think about some of the big TV shows in the last 15 years, Breaking Bad or Mad Men or The Sopranos, they all had some pretty despicable people at their center, but yet we wanted to know what happened to them every week. And in film, they call that the save the cat moment. You know, you have to give each of your characters something, make them complex, but then also show a vulnerability, surprise people so that they do care what at least happened in the story, even if they don't necessarily love every single person in your book. And I think that as a writer is what we have to be thinking about. If we only wrote about really nice people that everybody liked, our books would be pretty darn boring. And why did they get killed? You know, like, why are they a murder suspect? So I don't think that works in crime fiction, but I don't think it works in fiction more generally either, because books are about conflict and about difficult and challenging places in people's lives, and that doesn't bring out the best in people.
Well, Edwin, your characters have good sides and bad sides. Is that the way you're setting it up?
Yeah, I mean, again, because I write a series, the central couple in the series is Hester and Morgan. And so they do have to sort of move through from book to book. But I surround them with really horrible people who make terrible decisions. But Hester and Morgan also make really terrible decisions. And I think sometimes that's one of my favorite things to get them to do. And they do terrible things to each other. They do terrible things to other characters. They make horrible decisions around child raising.
Absolutely, yeah.
And you know, that's one of the fun things to sort of insert into the novel and to have them grow as characters. But you know, you don't with a series, you don't want it to be stagnant, of course. So the characters, you have to give them opportunities to grow from book to book.
Well, you authors have had numerous books. Can you chart your progress in a sense of, you know, I'm selling strong on the East Coast and maybe not as well as the Midwest, or are you realizing you have the same readers? You know, I can just think of Maxwell Perkins in the old day and saying, geez, the first 2 novels won't do anything, but after that, we'll build you and kick you out there. So Peter, do you find that you have a following after more than a half a dozen books?
Yeah, I think it feels that way looking on sort of Instagram. One of the things that I noticed that sort of pleased me to a degree was seeing an occasional reference to a Peter Swanson book, as that, you know, because I think it delivers something. I mean, you know, that's probably what publishers want too, which is a form of branding.
Right.
Yeah, it seems like I hear from people who look forward to my next book coming out. I think maybe I'm speaking only for myself when I say sales and how well I'm doing and things like that are kind of a gray mist for me that I don't penetrate very often. Partly I don't ask, and it's sort of a mystery. People are always like, "Oh, how's your book doing?" And I'm like, I don't know. It's out there. Hopefully someone's reading it. I mean, I don't always know. So I'm usually trying to focus on the next book.
Catherine, how about yourself? You've had 8 books, and you know, do you find that there's a following there, or you're getting different people from time to time?
No, I think I have a following, and I hope to get new readers with each book. I started out writing commercial women's fiction, and then I moved into the sort of more mystery suspense space about halfway through my career. So there are people who, you know, have followed me along the way, and some people who that's what they wanted to read and haven't followed me, and I picked up new people. I actually am somebody, so my last 4 or 5 novels have been published by an arm of Amazon Publishing, and Amazon is a very data-driven company, and so we actually get access not only to daily sales data if you want it. I'm not always recommending that you look at that, but that actually updates hourly, I believe, but geographical and also gender breakdowns and age breakdowns to the extent that they have it. So, and that's been a newer feature that's come in, which I found super interesting in terms particularly of the gender breakdown and more the age breakdown. So the biggest age category for my readers is, I think, over 55 years old. Now that is probably the biggest category of readers anyway, because people have more time as they get older and as they retire. And I always knew that obviously I had a bigger base of women readers, but there's still a big percentage of male readers there too. Men also just tend to read less fiction in general, to completely generalize. But it's been interesting. And what I have found, to come back to this festival, when I look at the geographic data, it's places that I've gone to, festivals that I've gone to. So there's a festival in Kentucky that I've gone to over and over again. And there's no reason why I would sell well in Kentucky, but I do. Same thing for Ohio, which has another festival that I've gone to. So I think, and why I was so happy to originally be coming to this festival and why I'm so happy that it's still going on is I think it's a great way to start building a fan base, because you encounter all kinds of people that would never stumble across your book, because you assemble this whole group of people in one place, maybe not physically now. And so I think that's something that's helped as well.
Edwin, is your goal, such as theirs, is, you know, finding strong spots and building them up? I don't think you've had as many books, but I'm sure you have a strategy. I think you're in the book business, actually, so you might have a strategy.
Well, I used to be in the book business. I mean, one of the interesting things about a series is that you'll have certain novels that are entry points into the series. So right now I'm working on the fourth book of the series, which is sort of, if you kind of think of it as a television season, this book is sort of wrapping up a season of my series. And the fifth book will pick all those storylines that I've been stringing out over the 4 books will sort of be wrapped up. We'll have a big question at the end of that fourth book. And then for anyone who wants to enter the series without starting from the beginning, that fifth book will be a good one to start with. With a series, it's also nice though too, because every time you have a new entry of the series come out, people discover you as an author. And a lot of people like to go all the way back to the beginning and then move forward through the whole series. So that's my strategy.
You know, even up to several years ago, a lot of newspapers reviewed books. Is that changing now? I mean, some large city papers, I'm in this field, have mostly dropped reviews, but reviews are very, very important. Do you find your books are still getting reviewed, Catherine, when you're out there? Or is it?
I mean, I think it depends on the book, to be honest. Yes, there are still magazine and newspaper reviews, and sometimes you can just have a book that hits in a particular way. So I'll Never Tell actually got tons of press when it came out last year, tons of reviews, tons of, most anticipated lists. And that definitely helps to create buzz and to create awareness. If you just go to basic marketing, people need to see something or hear about it more than once generally before they're going to buy it. And so it's super important, and it's definitely been limited. But there have been developments online. I think Peter mentioned Instagram. That in the last year or two has been a big space for book. They don't call themselves book, they call them bookstagrammers. And so they get a lot of books from publishers, and they post pictures and they put their reviews on there. So that's been a big development in the last couple of years, I think. But
nothing is ever. Do that herself?
No, I mean,
do that herself.
I do. I also review books of other people that I read. When I read people's books that I like, I will do the same thing. But I think, there's nothing like a good New York Times review, which I've never had, either way, good or bad. I think that's one of the holy grails of publishing. And for sure, those have huge impacts. And just as a last thing, I think the other thing that's been growing is celebrity book things like, there was Oprah for a million years, but now there is Reese Witherspoon, and there's Jenna Bush, and there's a couple of others out there who are driving the book business right now because of their interest in books. So those are sort of where reviews are coming from now.
So Peter, are you in that space that you look for reviews, or are you kind of don't put yourself full-heartedly in your hope of getting a good review necessarily?
I mean, getting press for your book is always a good thing. It's fascinating to me. It's obviously, as we're entering a world with less and less newspaper coverage of all things cultural, there are less and less book reviews. I don't know if they tip the scale. I think I have a personal theory, which is that the more mentions you get, that people read books when they hear it mentioned several times. It's not always the one time. Like they see it mentioned on Instagram, and then they see a review in their local paper, and then they start to get interested. That's my theory behind it. I was lucky enough to get in Marilyn Stasio, I don't know how you say her name, the New York Times mystery reviewer. This last one, I don't know if that tips the scales at all, but maybe, I mean, it can't hurt certainly, but I don't know. I didn't see any sort of spike in my sales. What's funny, and Edwin, I'll pass this off to you, but I have Boston. Have you been reviewed by the Boston Globe? Oh, you have. Okay. Yeah. I mean, I feel like I was reviewed, I think, once by the Boston Globe, but in general, I think the Globe doesn't tend to review genre fiction.
Yeah, I think that they tend to not do that.
Yeah.
Well, Edwin, do you look at Amazon these days? We all know that the bookstores are closed, and Amazon, if the people have the wherewithal and the motivation, do you keep an eye on Amazon in terms of your sales?
You know, I'm with Peter on this. I constantly fail at this, but I try my darndest not to pay attention to sales too much because, I mean, like, for instance, this book that we're talking about right now, The Missing Ones, I finished in June of 2018, you know, so I'm working on I finished another book and now I'm working on another book. And I really need all of my creative energy and all of my drive to go into finishing that book and not worrying about a lot of things that I don't necessarily have a lot of control over. Reviews, I mean, you know, this last book got some good reviews, but I agree with Catherine, you know, sometimes you get them and sometimes you don't. And it, you know, a lot of factors can go into that, so.
Catherine, an earlier panel was talking about getting with a small indie publisher. This woman had a indie publisher in Brooklyn. I think they did 5 books a year. And when she hit 300 books sold that year, he was quite happy because, you know, he made his nut, as it were. Well, what is a good number for you if you have a book coming out and life is good? It might be over 300, but I'm just asking what a good number would be.
You know what? It's so hard to say because I think it depends what space you're publishing in and who's publishing you. So, you know, an Amazon published book, and by that I don't mean self-publishing, but they have a traditional publishing house. They might have a number that they're looking for that's just not realistic outside of that ecosystem. So, you know, I don't have a target, but I was lucky enough that, you know, this book, I'll Never Tell, my last book, has sold over 100,000 copies, which is amazing. But that's not something that you can count on, or, you know, and in fact, Amazon gives special awards when you sell that many books, right? So, but you can't sit there going, I need to sell this many books. I think, you know, I definitely look at sales data and I look at reviews because I don't have any self-control in that regard. But what I am always really trying to do is just write the best possible book that I can, so that will get published. And publishing is a fickle place. And you could sell 1 million books a couple of years ago, and that doesn't mean you're going to sell a book 3 or 4 years later. So I think, you know, all that we can control, to build on what Edward was saying, is writing the best thing that we can, and that hopefully somebody will want to publish that and connect to it.
Peter, what would be a good number for you if you were going to have a book do well that year? Would it be 10,000? Would it be 40,000?
What would be a good number for me? Well, I'll go with a couple million. That would be good for me.
That would be great.
I mean, why not, right? Yeah. No, you know, I don't even know. I don't even know my number. I don't tend to get my numbers. I know the only numbers I kind of know is I did, it was a different territory. It was in the UK. I did very well with The Kind Worth Killing there, partly because it got picked up by a book club called the Richard and Judy Book Club. And I think I sold like a couple 100,000 copies of that book. So yeah, that was good.
Congratulations.
It's funny, numbers are funny. I mean, if you had a movie and 200,000 people went to it, it would be a bomb. I mean, it's different. I have no idea really how it works. I try and keep my head away from the business side. Another way I think about it, and again, I'm sounding like I'm able to do this. Of course, I do look at my Amazon rankings, and I do stress about reviews and all that thing, all the little miseries that authors go through. But in general, the way I try and think about it is, when the book is done, when I'm done with the book, it's out of my hands once it goes out into the world. I can't control it anymore. I think some authors do try and control that. To me, I'm like, it's done. I mean, I'll do, people want me to come and talk about my book. I'm happy to do that always, but I feel like it's entered a public sphere, and however people respond to it is beyond me. The only thing I can control is the next
number
book.
For you if you were going to have some sales?
Well, I can talk about this from the business side because I was a publisher for a long time. So most authors get an advance for their book, and you want to earn out your advance in your first year. And if you do, your publisher is happy. So the right number for me is a number that makes my publisher happy. So if you get $1 million advance, you got to sell a lot of books to earn $1 million in a year. And if you get a $1,000 advance, you don't have to sell as many books in that year to make your publisher happy.
Mm-hmm.
So my goal is always to earn out my advance in the first year.
So that's worked out well. In terms of these moments when many bookstores are closed, is this a strange moment, the fact that, well, people don't go into bookstores? Can you do other things? I mean, someone said, well, of course, dummy, you can write if you keep writing. But there are promotional elements that you folks can do while the bookstores are closed.
Well, I mean, a lot of promotion has moved out of doing traditional book tours. I think there are some authors that still get and do traditional book tours, but that's way less common now. I'd say 80–90% of authors, all of their promotion is online, whether it's marketing or advertising or doing, Q&As and things like that. So I think for me, the big difference has been all of the couple of festivals that I was going to, and my book in Canada, the publication date actually got pushed to August because none of the stores are open. And online books sales are less here. People still buy more physical books in Canada than they do, and Amazon does not have the kind of market share in Canada that it has in the States. So I think that that's changed. And I don't know about you guys, Edwin and Peter, but today was the first day that I wrote anything in 6 weeks. And it really was a bit like, there's been a few other events like that during my writing life in the last 10 or 15 years. The 2016 election was one of them, but I really had to sort of like mentally sit myself down and be like, okay, you have to turn in a book in 6 months. And so you need to start. So today you are going to write 1,000 words. And I did. And it's good that I broke that ice and I got that done. But these are challenging times for everyone. And finding the headspace to be able to focus and write and what's the world going to look like 2 years from now? And if you're writing contemporary fiction, like, do you reference COVID? Do you not reference COVID? Yep. If you're writing a scene in a restaurant, isn't that weird? Somebody, like the opening chapter of my new book, somebody's going to somebody else's house. Well, we're not doing that right now, So there's a lot of challenges to writing, publishing a book, promoting a book that did not exist.
Edwin, are you writing madly now that you don't have as much things in the air as perhaps? Are you writing in a significant way?
I feel there's an essay here. There's an essay in this book called Shitty First Drafts by Anne Lamott. And I fully embraced it. And it's been like really fun. So I've been producing quite a few very, very bad words for the last month or so. I'm gonna really have to clean them up. But this, if anyone who's listening is a writer, it's by Anne Lamott. It's called Shitty First Drafts. It's very inspirational when you're just trying to work through something that's not coming to you. So that's been helpful. I mean, I think that one of the benefits from what we're doing right now, like this is a benefit of what we're doing right now. I think there are going to be some things that stick from what we've been doing. All these, I mean, I'm a little tired of Zoom. I think everyone's tired of Zoom, but I think we're all learning different ways to connect with each other through different ways right now. And I think some of this will carry through into whatever this new world looks like. So that should be interesting.
And the fact that Catherine is here from Montreal is an asset that she, could join us, and you folks are from Boston. So yeah, it seems like you are moving forward. Peter,
I was supposed to go
now.
I am. I've been on a streak. I mean, and I will admit that it is a little bit of a struggle. It's not a struggle to find the time, it's a struggle to find the headspace and to turn away from the news. But for whatever reason, I've been able to do it. Maybe I've been using it as an escape to turn away from the news because in some ways, I mean, when this first happened, we watched the news all the time, and now it's become a little bit static. We're in this waiting game of we don't know where we're gonna be with this virus in 3 months. I mean, no one really knows, so we're all waiting. And Yeah, so I've been on a good streak writing my own shitty first draft, and feeling and enjoying that, and working on other things. And in terms of a business to be in, I'm feeling very fortunate. I believe people need books.
Mhm.
People need books now more than ever because a lot of people are staying home. Hopefully people are reading more. It's going to be hard on the indie bookstores, and that's certainly something to think about. I do think people will be excited to get back into them. I think they were having I think after Amazon destroyed a lot of bookstores, indie bookstores were coming back strong, at least here in the United States. I hope that continues. A lot of indie bookstores you can still order from. So I'd recommend that. But I think the business of books is it's going to be okay.
Well, that's my, not my mantra, but my idiom for the weekend that I just learned, a shitty first draft. And so if I get the
There's one
book,
thing
I'm going to
people
be
take
looking
away.
for one of my first drafts in there. So we're going to have a here. One of them is ask the authors what the impetus was to become a mystery writer. And so maybe each of you can speak briefly on, why it was mystery.
I grew up reading mystery books. I grew up on Nero Wolfe and Agatha Christie and Dick Francis. That was what was in my house. And my parents were both big mystery readers. And when I first started writing, I didn't think that I could write a mystery book. I actually met Louise Penny, who is a Montreal author, and was kind enough when I got my first book deal to sit down with me for 2 hours and let me ask her about the book business, which when I knew was nice at the time, but when I think back now, I'm like, that was literally the nicest thing anyone has ever done for me in publishing. And I didn't think I had the imagination to do it, but as I wrote 3 or 4 books and was sort of flexing my muscles, an idea came to me that was a mystery. And my first mystery is called Smoke, and it's about a wildfire in a small town, and the main character is an investigator trying to figure out who started the fire because it was arson. And I enjoy that space. I always like twists in books, and I think it's fun to think about how you're going to surprise the reader and keep the mystery hidden. And that is now how stories come to me. So that's how I became a mystery writer.
Excuse me, Catherine, I'm going to have to move along because we have some questions.
Yeah,
Edwin, do you want to answer that? How did you get into mystery?
Oh, real quick, when I was about 11 years old, my family and I used to go on these month-long family camping trips. So there was a lot of reading. And I was sort of making the transition from young adult to adult novels. And my parents bought me a copy of Agatha Christie's The Seven Dials Mystery, which I loved. I loved every single thing about it. It's one of her older novels. It's set at a manor house. There's a character named Bundle. And I read it. That was exactly what I wanted. I thought this is what I want to do with my life. And then it took me 35 years to teach myself how to do it.
And Peter, yourself, you have such a broad knowledge of the mystery field as a result of writing this last one when the proponent was a protagonist was a owner of a bookstore. What about you?
Yeah, I mean, it's amazing when you talk to mystery authors and mystery readers how often it goes back to Agatha Christie, which is an author that's often introduced to young people because it's the writing style, you can understand it, but you fall in love. So I was an early reader of mysteries. In fact, there's a terrible piece of writing advice out there, which is write what you know, and that's a terrible piece. Writing advice because we'd never got science fiction or fantasy or mystery or any of these things. It's write what you read. So when I started to write novels, I knew I had to. All the ideas I have are mystery ideas. And
who were some of your favorites initially? I always like to ask this question because Elmore Leonard and Scott Turow are two. Sarah Paretsky are some that I remember. Who were some of your early favorites?
I loved, when I first started to buy used books, I loved John D. MacDonald, the Travis McGee series. I loved Agatha Christie. I discovered Ruth Rendell at some point, and she was sort of a next step up from Agatha Christie that I loved her mysteries as well. And when I was young, I loved Dick Francis, his horse racing novels.
The horses. Edwin, who did you like when you were coming along? Or who do you like now?
Well, I liked a lot of classic mysteries when I was younger, and then I went into a Victorian period where I only read Victorian novels. And then when I was in college, I started not doing my reading for college, and I would go down to the local library, and that's when I discovered Sue Grafton, which was my first sort of modern mystery writer. And so that's what I would say.
Catherine, how about yourself?
Same, Sue Grafton, Dick Francis, Scott Churro, and what's his name? Who's the lawyer?
John Grisham.
Yeah, John Grisham. So those were the sort of the ones that I grew up reading and read through my 20s.
You know, one of the questions here, and most interesting family relationship in a mystery that you did not pursue, you did not write it. Is there some relationship that you thought about, but you just couldn't pull it forth, and therefore it never got into the pages?
Oh, you're asking for the most interesting family relationship in one of our novels that didn't make it in?
Well, and that you weren't able to get into the novel, say, yes.
I thought you were asking for interesting family relationships in another novel. So I'm going to answer that, because I can't think of one. But and I instantly thought of The Secret History, which is one of the books in 8 Perfect Murders. There's a very interesting brother-sister relationship in that very creepy campus college novel.
Well, I think you refined the question. Nice work, Peter.
I'll choose Case Histories by Kate Atkinson. There's a really wonderful relationship among sisters in that book.
Yeah.
That sort of drives the whole novel, and then the subsequent novels as well.
And Catherine?
Nothing comes to mind, but I love The Secret History. It's one of my favorite top 10 favorite books. So I'll pick that too.
Well, we're getting towards the end, but I wanted to ask if you can talk a little about your next project coming up. I think all of you have alluded to something, but Catherine, what are you working on now that you did 1,000 words and you're back on the track?
Yeah. Well, before that, like Edwin mentioned, I mean, I think all of us are kind of book a year authors. And so a book comes out and we've already written the next one and are probably starting to work on the one after. So June 9th, my next book, You Can't Catch Me, comes out, and it's about a woman named Jessica Williams who meets another woman in an airport bar with the same name and birthday as her. And when she gets home from her vacation, all of her money is missing, was stolen by this other Jessica Williams, and she goes looking for her and finds a string of identically named victims. So that's what it's about. June 9th.
Edwin, what have you got going on?
My next book is called Watch Her. It comes out on December 29th. It's the third Hester Thursby book, and this one's set in Boston. Most of the action takes place in Jamaica Plain, and it's about a fictional for-profit university that's about to go down the tubes. Hester is hired to find a list of missing students, a list of students who the school can't locate. She discovers that most of them don't actually exist, and the few that do exist start getting killed off.
Interesting.
Good. Peter, how about yourself?
I don't have a title yet for my book. Well, it has a title. It has several titles. I don't know what it's going to be published under, because it's every time I send a book in, my editor picks a different title for it. But it's tentatively titled Abigail's Honeymoon or Heart Pond Island. It is similar to Edwin's last book, set on an island off the coast of Maine, over the course of a honeymoon that goes very, very wrong.
Sounds great.
No one really knows what's happening in the future to what we're all doing in terms of book selling, book writing. But maybe if we could just end it here in a pretty good way. If you have thoughts, Catherine, where we're going, when the bookstores open, will there be more energy? Will there be more people getting out there? And what can we expect? And then when things do open, it seems like every state has a different take on that.
Well, the book and fiction is something that's not new. We didn't invent that 10 years ago. It's been around through the course of history. And so it's not going anywhere. I do not have a crystal ball about, who's going to survive and are there big publishers that are going to go under, but I am 100% certain that there will still be books being published when this is over, and there will still be books being written, because human nature is storytelling. And so that, you know, that's the only thing I know for sure. There will still be books.
Sure. Peter, are you still bullish on books?
Yeah, we'll need two types of stories after this is, or wherever we go with this. One will be stories we need to remind us of the world prior to COVID-19, and then we'll need stories that take place in the world afterwards. There'll be both types. So yeah, I think books will do fine.
Edwin?
Well, I'm looking forward to a nonstop party sometime in 2021. But you know, I think that we'll probably see a whole slew of pandemic books that are coming out pretty soon. And you know, I hope that we get to a place with storytelling where this time is a really interesting historical time that we'll be able to explore, and we'll have reached a new time that is similar to what we all used to love. So that's my hope.
Well, good. We have one comment here. I don't think that brings forth an answer, but we had a comment. All the online promotion can't compare to meeting and hearing an author in person. In addition, there is nothing like browsing the aisles of a superior bookstore. Staff that can make a good book talk and know their customers and their stock are better than any book blurb. So I think that's inspirational in its own way also. People are traditionalists. I think things will go well. And it's good to, you know that we have some optimism going on. Anything else that anyone would like to remark at this time? We are just about at the end, but
I just want to thank you, Dick, and the festival, and remind everyone, like you did, or like Leslie did at the beginning, that the festival is selling books through 2 independent bookstores. They have all of our books there, and the best way to keep those places in business is to buy their products. So, and us too. Thank you.
That's a good point. And I think, who knows, maybe in the future, part of the literary festival will be online and part of it will be in person. So Leslie, I want to thank you. First of all, I want to thank our guests for being here. I thought this is very energetic and enlightening, and you know that the shitty draft will never leave my mind, I'll tell you that.
Well, thank you all.
But
so
Leslie,
much.
you
Thank you, Dyke.
beautifully, and can you sign us off right now, Leslie?
Well, this is the last event of this first day of the Newburyport Literary Festival online. I miss being in Newburyport, but I'm so glad to see your faces online. Thank you so much for being part of our panel and for being part of the discussions today. And we'll be back on May 3rd with more panels and authors. So please check out our website at newburyportliteraryfestival.org, and you can come back and see some more great talks about books with great authors. Thank you again. Enjoy the rest of your weekend, everyone.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, panelists.
Bye.
Thank you very much.
Bye.